So I think it's really important for people to start reducing their meat consumption for sustainability reasons. And actually, the meat industry is one of the biggest contributors to climate change. About 18% of greenhouse gases are produced from meat and dairy farming. And I think it's good that they're showing a vegetarian diet here and showing people that vegetarian food can be really fun and interesting and promoting it in a positive way rather than in a negative way, just constantly talking about the ills of factory farming. But at the same time, it's quite important, I think, to acknowledge that things like cheese and eggs also place quite a heavy impact on the environment when it comes to sustainability. And I find it interesting that if you're talking and thinking about plant-based diets from an environmental perspective, there really isn't any reason why you should be a complete abolitionist. So you're still helping the environment if you have a meal of meat once a month or something like this. It doesn't really make your contribution to the planet any less just because very occasionally you eat a bit of meat or you eat some eggs or cheese. It's just about reducing it to kind of, the practical minimum. But that really doesn't mean that you have to be completely strict about it. And if you eat animal products once, it doesn't then mean that you can just binge completely without any guilt because you've lost your title of being vegetarian or vegan. I think a lot of the people that come here, they might be quite worried about whether they're going to like the vegetarian food beforehand, but I think most of them cope pretty well with it. They enjoy the cooking and it kind of opens their experiences to new flavours. Because when you're cooking with meat, the dishes that you make become a bit slow and the same, and you don't really feel like you need to experiment and add new spices and add new tastes all the time. But when you're thinking outside the box and trying to substitute meat with other vegetable, like plant-based foods, it really kind of increases inspiration for just experimenting in a whole load of new ways and trying different exotic plants from all over the world, which maybe isn't that sustainable, getting it from the other side of the world, but actually it's still a lot more sustainable than eating something like beef, because a lot of animals are fed like a fodder crop, which is grown beforehand, so that requires a huge amount of land to grow corn to feed to cows. It's something like 7 times the amount of land is needed to produce the same amount of calories of meat as it is to produce the same amount of calories of grain. And also the water needed to irrigate those fields is massive, and cows produce methane just from flatulence and burping and farting through how they digest, because they've got bacteria in their stomach. All ruminants produce methane, like sheep and goats as well, but cows by far are the biggest out of that group of animals. So although getting plants from the other side of the world isn't that great, and we do kind of try and keep it to a minimum and eat local when we can, it's still a lot better than eating meat and dairy products. Okay, so personally, I've always been vegetarian. I was raised vegetarian, and my main motivation for not eating meat is because of the environment. When I'm at home, I'm virtually vegan, but then when I'm travelling, sometimes it's hard to get vegan food, and it's just easier to be more relaxed about it. And like I was saying before, you're just trying to reduce it as much as you can. It's not like you eat a bit of cheese and that's it. You're completely no longer a vegan and you might as well eat cheese every day. That's just a very strange concept to have. I think a lot of vegans, they get sidetracked into animal rights, and although I think it's a very admirable cause, I think it's a bit of a niche topic, and I don't think plant-based diets are really going to spread that rapidly if people keep on focusing on animal rights, because people, they just close off about it, especially the concept of speciesism, when you say that all animals and humans should be treated equally. I think that's a bit flawed, because if you talk to someone about that, you're basically saying that they're taking part in a Holocaust, because the amount of suffering and pain that animals go through in factory farms is immense. So if their lives are worth as much as a human's life, you are basically accusing them of the worst sort of torture and abuse. So the moment you start talking about that kind of thing, people get instantly very defensive, and they're much more likely to just close off and just say, oh no, all animals are dumb, it's stupid, I'm going to keep eating my burgers. So my tactic is kind of just be more relaxed about it, and certainly not focus on that side of things nearly as much, and just kind of lead by example. Yeah. Okay, so I find it interesting that people worry about overpopulation, and although it's kind of, it is a genuine issue, and we do need to make strives to get everyone access to like family planning and contraception, and also educate women in order to reduce population. Actually, if you look at it, the farmed animal population is 10 times as large as the human population. There's about 7 billion people on the planet, but there's 70 billion farmed animals. So this consumption of meat is vastly increasing the pressure that humanity has on the planet. And also, unlike with human population, because animals have less rights than people, and they're being killed anyway, it is within our power, as sad as it may seem, to reduce this population quite rapidly if people, the animal population rather, very rapidly if people choose to stop eating meat. You know, you could just, stop breeding them and keep consuming them until the population was much, much lower. I mean, it would be good to keep some farmed animals, maybe for very poor communities in the third world, but certainly in the Western world there's not really any role that these animals need to play in living a healthy lifestyle. What else was I thinking? I think it's important to recognise that meat was extremely important for the development of humanity. Without starting to eat meat, I don't think there's any way that we could have reached where we are today. Especially in the northern hemisphere where there's not that much edible plant food around, being able to raise animals really increased our population and led to the development of science and cities forming to begin with, and then you'd have your educational institutions moving in, and that's basically how humanity developed, and without that we probably would be living much more like chimpanzees do today. But although it was a good strategy to start to eat meat in the past, I strongly feel that it's a very bad strategy for the future. So what made sense then no longer makes sense now, with all these issues around the amount of resources it takes to produce meat. It seems clear to me that if we want to thrive in the future, we need to start cutting down our meat consumption very rapidly. And it's not really happening. It kind of feels like we are reducing our meat consumption in the Western world, so like in the European Union and America. But actually, if you look at global meat consumption, it's still increasing very rapidly. Countries like China and India, their meat consumption is increasing at an exponential rate. I think it have maybe doubled in the last 50 years. So it's really important that we kind of take action now to show that we can live like this and lead by example for the developing world, and show that it can be done differently. I think most people can live a perfectly healthy lifestyle on a vegan diet. Obviously, you've got to look at what you're eating and eat a varied diet, and not just eat, mashed potato every day or just white rice and basic foods. You've got to have a big variety of fruits and vegetables and beans, and really kind of look at what you're eating. I mean, I've never eaten meat and I haven't experienced any kind of health problems related to it. If you really pay attention to what you're eating, I think most people can live healthily on the vegan diet. You can also take supplements that are kind of synthesised from plant food if you really need them, but I've never experienced any ill health from eating a purely vegetarian diet my whole life. I've got quite a lot of energy. I feel pretty healthy and satisfied with my diet. I'm able to eat a lot more food, I think, than I would be able to and not put on weight, but I quite enjoy that because it's just tasty anyway. And also, when it comes to protein, you can eat nuts and beans, and there's certainly enough protein for you to need. I think we've kind of got this idea that you need lots and lots of protein. Another good source of protein that we could potentially use in terms of sustainability is actually farming insects and entomology. Insects produce energy from the food that they eat much more efficiently than something like a cow or a chicken. So when a cow converts grain into beef, I think it requires about 8 kilograms of grain to produce 1 kilogram of beef. an insect only requires 2 kilograms of plant food to produce 1 kilogram of insect protein. So that is another very valid option. And I know we've got this kind of social issue about eating insects, that people don't like the idea of it, but they are a good source of food. And if it was kind of made into a processed meal, something like an insect burger or an insect sausage, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that much, and it would still be a very good source of food. I mean, if you wanted to just eat insects as they are, then that's also fine. But I think to make it more acceptable to the Western style of thinking, you could certainly process them up into a nice hot dog. I've seen documentaries that say people who live the longest are vegan. So they've looked at loads of different groups of people, and actually the highest life expectancies are associated with the vegan diet. So that's not necessarily saying that they're going to be the people with the most energy, or, you know, the strongest people, but certainly in terms of longevity, there's a very strong correlation between eating a vegan diet and life expectancy, positive correlation. And also, you know, if you just keep check of your blood tests, then I think you'll be fine. I think some people do struggle on a vegan diet, and they do experience serious health issues. So if you are reducing your meat consumption heavily and you start to feel a bit like you've got no energy at all and you feel a bit crappy, then obviously you need to go and talk to your doctor. Maybe they can get you some supplements, or maybe even you can start eating a little bit more meat, but just kind of still keep it at a lower level than the Western standard. I mean, this is the thing, it's always about just reducing it as much as you can and trying to improve the situation a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually, in terms of sustainability, probably insects are more sustainable than eating eggs and milk. And they're probably better for you as well. Milk is an extremely unnatural food for any adult human, partly because we stop being able to digest milk very efficiently after about 7 years old. Actual enzymes that are required to digest it, they no longer exist in our stomach, and lactose intolerance used to be extremely common before humans started eating cow's milk, and it's something that's kind of we've slowly been evolving to cope with cow's milk, but it's still not particularly good for anyone. And I think a very large percentage of the population is lactose intolerant. Also with cows, a calf becomes full size in just a year. So the amount of growth hormones that there are in cow's milk compared to human milk is absolutely huge. And our bodies don't really need this stuff, we don't know how to deal with it. And a lot of the calcium and proteins and stuff in milk that people always rate as being really healthy, a lot of the time they're not particularly easy for our body to actually access. So they're in the milk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually able to remove these minerals and proteins out of the milk for our own benefit. So I would actually say that eating insects is a more sustainable and healthy option than eating eggs and milk and cheese.
Okay.